party down, location mysterious. Wanna rock this con like my man James Tiberius. Jesse and Marina, they're mad clever like the Negus. Gonna guide you through the scenes, beam from London to Las Vegas. Where to go, how to dress, when to sleep, who to see. Celebs not to miss, Cernus Wong and SMG. Star Trek into awesome, build some memories at last. Set the proper course, the Shore Leave Podcast. Boom.
Hello, everyone. You're listening to the episode 53 of Shore Leave, your Star Trek Convention Community Podcast. This is Marina Kravchuk, one of the co-hosts. Unfortunately, Jeff could... Oh, sorry, Jeff. See? I have to start over because I was talking to Jeff just before we... All right, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the episode 53 of Shore Leave, your Star Trek Convention Community Podcast. This is Marina Kravchuk, one of your co-hosts. Jesse, unfortunately, could not be joining us today. He's sick, and we all wish that he's going to get better very, very quickly, hopefully. Instead, to a wonderful surprise, actually, I'm very glad that she's with us today, is the person who actually doesn't need introductions. A most important part of our Tricorder tribe, Heather Barker. Welcome back, Heather. I'm so glad to welcome you back on our podcast.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here. For the record, 76 days according to my countdown until STLV.
Oh my God. I am surprisingly, this is going to be my 10th one. And yep. I can't believe that after 10 years that I can still get to that point where I'm like, I actually already have like a little packing pile going.
Yeah.
Planning.
This is my 11th because I started in 2009. So if I count from there, yep. 11 consecutive STLVs. And I think what it is for me, aside from having so much new Star Trek, right, is the fact that even now, like, we are still getting new people coming to the convention. And so I am so excited to continue to meet these friends that I've made on social media, in person, and even like friends, like my friend Seth, he's here in Colorado and he's been to STLV once, but he's not really been to STLV, like not the way that we do it as fans, you know? Yeah. So I'm really, really excited for that. And I think speaking of new people going to conventions, we have a guest who's a new person, right?
Well, she's certainly new for Tricorder Transmissions and specifically for Shore Leave. That's a first-time guest. And we're actually going to be talking about a brand new convention as well, which hasn't been covered yet in 53 episodes that we've had. Well, 52 that we've had. We're going to be talking about AwesomeCon. It's a convention held in Washington, D.C. It's relatively recent. It's only launched in 2013. And we're going to get all the nitty-gritty in a little bit. But for now, I would like to introduce a special guest, Sarah Triplett, who's our fellow convention goer, fellow STLV vet, and a wonderful, wonderful Star Trek cosplayer. I really, really dig your cosplay, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start basically, since you are a brand new guest to Shore Leave. Just generally talk a little bit about yourself as far as a fan of Star Trek. When did you become a fan? How did you get in? And how did you get actually into the convention scene? Do you remember what your first convention was?
I do, actually. It's been so long. So my name's Sarah Triplett. I'm kind of a late bloomer as far as Star Trek is concerned. I think my mom was feeding me subliminal messaging as I grew up, but then it didn't really click until after college. I've really only been in the fandom for almost 5 years now, I guess. But I kind of dived into the deep end without any preparation because I've been a part of fandom for over a decade now. My first convention was Anime Boston in 2007. Wow. And I've been going to conventions for ever since then.
Wow, that's quite incredible. So what actually made you, decide, okay, I'm going to go to a convention? You were particularly into anime at the time, or was it somebody in the family was going, or friends?
So I was pretty into it at that point, but a friend of mine brought me to my first convention. It was just for one day. And I remember asking my mom if I could go because she was very strict and I was bracing myself for that no. And she said, yep, no problem. Like, wait, really? She's like, yeah, I went to Star Trek conventions all the time when I was your age, so it would be hypocritical of me not to let you go. And that's when I found out my mom was a Trekkie. So definitely generational. But
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So what was your first track convention, specifically track one?
Because I don't believe in starting things slow, my first one was the 50th anniversary of STLV.
Nice,
Talking about D-Band, yes.
Yeah, that was numero uno for the Star Trek conventions, and I went to Vegas that year, New Jersey, and Star Trek Mission New York.
Wow, that is very impressive. Yeah.
Have you been to STLV since the 50th?
Yeah, every year since then.
Oh, yay. Okay, I'm so happy right now.
It's addicting, isn't it?
That's a great word for it. I remember buying tickets for the 50th anniversary was ridiculous. Like,
yeah.
I think I was trying the online and phone call method simultaneously for a straight day and a half, and finally I got through to somebody, and I always order at the convention now just because it's cheaper and easier.
Yeah.
So let's actually talk about specifically AwesomeCon. How did you, if I remember correctly, you're local, you're somewhere in the area, you're reasonably close to Washington, right?
Yes, yeah. I live about 90 minutes away from DC.
Oh, that's pretty good. So you can basically just drive. You don't even have to stay in the city, right?
I do stay in the city. So I've been going to AwesomeCon for a couple of years now. And the first year I told myself, it's in driving distance, I can do this. And that ended up being a very bad idea because at the end of the convention day, you do not want to walk however many blocks away I parked, drive an hour and a half back, wake up early the next morning, do whatever cosplay you need to get done. So I just get the hotel now.
I hear you. I did that for Star Trek Mission New York because it's basically my usual work commute. And then by the end of, I think, Saturday, I realized that it's just a 3-day event. And I figured, do the usual, train back and forth. And when I was just barely dragging my feet, I'm like, that I really should have figured something else. Maybe not staying in the city because it's very expensive, but
I found that out.
So how did you find out about AwesomeCon? Is it just something that randomly popped up now that you started doing conventions, or somebody told you about it?
Yeah, it's one of those things that kind of just popped up. It's one of those cases where Facebook ads actually was very useful. But I think it was their guest announcement that Carl Urban was going to be there that year. So it's like, I have to go. Who wouldn't want to go? I had just recently moved to the DC area because I grew up in Massachusetts and I was very big into the con scene up there. So when I moved down here, I was on the lookout for any conventions I could find, and AwesomeCon just happened to pop up first. It was pretty young at that point, the convention itself, and it's noticeably grown since then.
Do we know what year this convention started?
2013. That's
2013.
Yeah,
okay.
I kind of just did a little bit of a research, and just generally, you're looking at it. It's I term it mid-size, meaning it's not yet the monster that we have. Sort of like the New York conventions or anything that goes above or close to or above 100,000 people over the duration of the convention. This one is still under. I think there's somewhere in 65,000 to 70,000 people. I'm actually curious to hear if there are any numbers this year because it seemed to be very well attended, especially Saturday and Sunday.
And it's like cross genre. It's all all different types of stuff.
Yep, yeah. Everything you can think of that they can find somebody to host a panel for, they cover it.
Which is actually something I found fascinating about this particular Comic-Con. It's kind of expected. You go to Comic-Con, you expect that, comic books, obviously, although I found that some of the Comic-Cons kind of started to shunt them aside. It's like a side aisle somewhere far away, and then you get the rest of the pop culture sort of dominating the main space. This particular one, besides that, they also had this featured areas where they had sciences very well represented, and they had a maker's alley. So you had specifically vendors who actually made something themselves, and that's what the product they were selling. And the separate area for the kids, the AwesomeCon Junior. That was something that I can't really say that I observed at any other convention. A lot of Comic-Cons just generally try to kind of diversify and do everything besides pop culture and gaming, but also do a little bit of science, for instance. But this was just so nicely organized, very clearly. It was like, okay, these are all the things that you can find at our convention. Now, do you said that you've been going for several years now. Has there been sort of change besides the crowd size? Did the convention kind of started out so nicely organized, or was it something else at the beginning?
At least as far as I've noticed, it's definitely been a learning curve. The size of the convention, as far as attendance, has been pretty similar as far as I've noticed. Maybe it has grown a little bit as the years have gone on, but the first year I went was the convention's fourth year, 2016, and they had some pretty big guests, notably from Doctor Who. They had Peter Capaldi and Jenna Coleman, and the only day that they were there was Sunday, which traditionally is a very slow convention day. And this is the one Sunday that I've been more exhausted on that Sunday than I have at any Sunday convention. But they did not handle the sales of their VIP very well at all. I think they oversold them. They did not schedule things properly. They overlapped the VIP photo ops with VIP seating for the Q&A, which all the VIPs ended up missing because of the photo op. People who bought autographs, they ran out of autograph time, even catering specifically to people who bought that Doctor Who VIP, to the point where Peter and Jenna actually canceled their flights or postponed their flights and stayed longer at the convention to make sure they got to all the fans.
It's very
props to them.
Props to them, absolutely. They did not need to do that, and they were very understanding about the whole process and were very cordial to the fans. Not one of the convention's finest moments, though.
Yeah, but it's wonderful that besides I'm sure listening to a whole lot of different feedback, but it's great to see that they adjusted, that they changed things and changed them quickly.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I went the year after, and everything was night and day. The photo op areas were much. It was kind of a mosh pit that first year. They just had people floating around to this back corner of the exhibit hall. And then when it was your turn to line up, you kind of just rushed forward. And then the year after, and since then, they have very clear and concise lines that they set people up. They have kind of a staging ground where they don't even let you approach the lines until 10 minutes before. And they're very clear with the lanes that they set people up in. They've got screens up there to let you know 5 minutes until this person starts lining up. It's so much better. They haven't oversold tickets since then, as far as I'm aware. The scheduling is much more useful or more sensible.
Yeah, I'm speaking of just generally, you had mentioned the photo op area. Have they always used Epic photo ops? Because they tend to be this kind of super organized where it's very difficult for something get messed up with the photo ops. So somebody else must have been used if it were that kind of rushed and crowds and people didn't know who's going where.
I honestly don't remember if that first year they used Epic, but they've used Epic ever since the line situation had been corrected.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed, that they have it down to a T. It's almost like a military operation where they all the times you said with the screen, and then it's like, okay, follow the person with the red flag, and then everybody just lines up and boom, done. And then you walk out.
You would have to try very hard to get lost in that area.
Generally speaking about the convention space itself, I don't know how they manage it, but it would appear that they basically rent almost the entire convention center.
They do.
Yeah, and that's something that very often is not the case. And Walter E. Washington is a very, very large convention center. I was kind of expecting that it would be like just the bottom, the lower floor, or maybe half of the center, because it's kind of like, if you can visualize it, it's like two city blocks separated by a sky bridge. So I thought maybe they'll be just in one of them, but it seemed that kind of that's why I was kind of shocked at how like nicely spread out everything was. It wasn't like really crowded, feeling like you're walking with shoulder to shoulder to the rest of the fans in the crowd.
Yeah, it's rare that I ever feel claustrophobic at that convention, but it never feels empty. Which, for comparison, Star Trek Mission New York being held in the Javits Center, I'm sure I've never attended NYCC, but I imagine that can get very crowded versus. Yeah. Mission New York was much smaller in comparison.
Very much so, because it was genre and it was just general. I mean, it's apples and oranges very much so in terms of crowd size. New York Comic Con at the, sort of I don't even know what to call it at this point. I mean, it is one of two tentpole events of the year, them in San Diego. And at this point, they actually cannot fit all the events inside Javits anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, I think there's about 4 or 5 other venues that are used across the west side of Manhattan, where they have to move out some of the panels there or some of the other events.
Sounds like Dragon Con.
Yeah. I don't know how many people Dragon Con has, but New York Comic Con topped 180 a couple of years ago.
Wow.
80,000. Yeah, so it's I can imagine it's hugely intimidating to a lot of people. And
I haven't graduated to that yet.
Yeah.
Not for lack of trying.
Regardless of that, I mean, AwesomeCon in that regard, I was very pleased. The way they set this whole thing up so that, listeners have an idea is that, you can buy the tickets online or you can actually purchase them at the door. I don't believe, I'm sure there have been probably a couple of years when things must have sold out, but I didn't really see that kind of like, oh, okay, we're out of VIPs. VIPs would seem to be, they were selling until the very end.
Yeah, they were selling them to the very end. I know that at least on Facebook, they were saying that they were very close to selling out. And I think they have gotten stricter with having a set limit to those VIP passes, especially considering the benefits included with them. You don't want to give everyone at the convention autograph line fast passes because then the fast pass line isn't a fast pass.
Wait. There are autograph line fast passes now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, those were very helpful for certain guests.
Yeah, we probably should explain like the whole tier, because it seems like
there's a lot of tiers.
Manages to come up with their own like little special thing. So you do have single day tickets, you have the 3-day weekend tickets, and then they have all like different types of VIPs. One is being just your general, they call it VIP Geekend actually. And it gets you the admission, it gets you complimentary lanyard, it gets you a collector bag, you get 30 minutes early access every day of the convention.
Which is amazing.
You get main stage priority sitting, which means that you want to go to a panel at the largest, basically the main theater, the main stage. You line up separately and they let you in first. That means like you and a couple of hundred others with the VIP Geekend, but still you get early access before everybody else comes in. You get some discount for convention merchandise. I think you can also like add on stuff like convention shirts, convention exclusives that you just get, I think, discount on that there's nothing else beyond that. But the most important part is that you get what is called those fast passes. And I think that it's basically you look at the badge and they're like 4 little circles, 1, 2, 3, 4. And you can basically use them if you decide to go to a signing booth for an autograph or you decide to do a photo op. Instead of lining up with your group, because what happens, you get a lot of people, if we're talking about photo ops, everybody gets divided into groups, so you don't have huge crowding in the photo op area. Instead of doing that, they say, well, if we have VIPs who want to use their fast pass, come on forward, and you basically go to the front of the line. And same kind of works for the autographs. There's like a little separate line that says VIP. If you want to use your fast pass, you can get into that separate line and you get to the front of the line faster for the autographing.
Faster is a relative term, but
yeah, if everybody's using their fast pass with somebody, you still end up with a line. But it's a nice thought.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I've not heard of that anywhere. So thanks, Disney.
Always goes back to Disney.
Yeah, I used it a couple of times and I absolutely like that. And even though it's like, if it were really crowded, it probably would have worked perfectly. But it was just sort of like, these weren't really very crowded photo ops that I used it for. Actually, one of them, it was a photo op that was added as the convention was ongoing. It was the Crushers. So it was Will Wheaton together with Gates McFadden. They literally edited like Friday afternoon. And Gates actually announced
that was added so late.
Yeah, she announced it during the panel. She was like, they told me to tell you there is a dual photo op that was added to the list if you'd like to stop by, buy a ticket. And I did, and I showed up for, my sister and I did it together. And we show up and there's 5 people in the line. And it was like, oh, probably people didn't hear about this. Next day, people took advantage because they saw people posting photos on, people. I mean, I posted in a couple of groups. Like, are they doing this? I'm like, yeah, go ahead. Sunday, they're doing this again. So I'm sure Sunday was a bit more crowded for that particular photo op. So
yes, it can be very dependent on the guest. I mean, some guests you don't need to use it for. And especially when you're only given 4, you kind of have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
But I know two of the guests that I was there for, I definitely needed them for. Carrie Elwes from Princess Bride, definitely needed to use it on him.
Yeah.
And then John Bernthal, the Punisher.
What? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna get to that. That's one of the things that really I'm like, oh, I have to be going to Awesome Con this year because the guest list is something else. Just to finish up talking about the ticket tiers, there's two additional ones. Club Awesome. Well, first of all, there are also guest specific VIPs. Those are the ones where basically you guarantee the photo op, you guaranteed an autograph, right? And
Yes.
I think the access to the Q&A panel if the guest was doing a Q&A panel. So that's sort of like a pretty typical one. Most Comic-Cons actually have that when you have a VIP specifically for a specific guest.
When you buy those, do you have to buy them in addition to admission, or they
It includes
include
admission.
No, that
Okay.
includes admission, yeah. These are all
And
admission.
when you add it up all together, it's actually, if you're planning on getting that photo op and autograph anyway, it's usually a few dollars cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and then there is Club Awesome, which is you get more fast passes. I think that's really the only difference as far as I can see. Oh, there's some additional stuff like you get a convention shirt and some merchandise included. And then there is Club Awesome Reserve, which is the most expensive ticket. And that's basically you get automatically reserved sitting at the front of the main stage. You get unlimited number of fast passes for the autographs and photo ops. And then everything else that all the other tickets have, the admissions and the 30-minute early access, etc.
And
So
what's the price range like?
single days, we're talking early bird pricing. I have a page open so I can tell you exactly. It was depending on the day, $35 to $50.
Okay.
And then once it's past the early bird, it's $40 to $55. And I think it was more expensive, but that's buying online. It was a little bit more expensive if you bought at the door. But still, we're talking, basically average $50, $60 for a single day. That's comparable to pretty much every other event I can think of.
Yeah.
And then it gets like the 3-day VIP, it gets obviously more expensive. For 3 days, it's $80. The VIP Geekend is $150. And then Club Awesome goes to almost $400. And
Wow. Okay.
the reserve one is $1,000. Now that's just the actual ticket. You also get, there's, I think it's 10%. It's a service fee plus the taxes. So it actually comes
DC
out.
taxes will get you.
Yeah.
And of course, given that they are very kid friendly, they had, like I said, this whole separate area and a little bit of special programming specifically for the kids. It's not 6 or 5, which is typically the age that I see at the conventions. I think their cutoff is 3 years. So everybody, kids 3 years and older, you actually do have to get them a ticket, but it's a separate kid ticket that's like $15 or $20, something like that.
And is this run by a company or like a fan run?
It's at the moment it's an indie convention, I guess would be the best way to put it. Organized by a specific person or the committee at this point, but they're not run by Reed Pop or anything like that.
Yeah. So kind of in between, because I think like Starfest here in Denver is similar, where it's like a small group or a few people that run it that were kind of developed from fans, but not quite like Dragon Con, I guess, if that makes sense, even though Dragon Con is huge. But
yeah, I'm looking at incidentally, I have to mention it. They have a very well laid out website. Like everything you can think of, you're going to find it online, like all the descriptions for the tickets and the events and the guest list and all the policies, everything, frequently asked questions, all that laid out. So I'm actually looking at their about page, and yeah, it's the people who run this, the CEO, the creative directors, they're all fans
cool.
And they love everything from, Studio Ghibli to Star Wars to Star Trek, everything.
Yeah, well, I like that because I think that reflective in the programming, which we'll mention here at some point, the panels wind up being much more fan-focused with content than produced. And that's, it's something we've talked about, like with something like STLV versus Dragon Con.
Yeah.
And so you don't have, I don't know, there's just more variety and more things that I think fans would be interested in at some of these types of conventions.
I agree completely. And I have something that I already mentioned. AwesomeCon was impressive in that regard in terms of that they had very nice just generally coverage of, well, besides the genres, you also had the sciences, you had children specific stuff. They had separate Pride Alley, so there was the queer creators and fans, separate programming, and I'm pretty sure the vendors. They did, like I said, it was very nicely organized. They had everything. So that's kudos. I was impressed. This was probably the most straightforward and relaxed even Comic-Con I have ever attended.
Nice.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. No, because I got the tickets. Oh, something to mention about the tickets. That I don't think I've come across before. And actually, thank you, Sarah, for your help, because I realized that you clued me on that could be done. I originally bought just 2 single-day tickets. I was planning to be there just Friday and Saturday. And then it just so happened that I was like, well, it kind of makes sense to be there all 3 days. Especially, I think they announced the schedule, and I realized some of the stuff that I really wanted to see was happening on Sunday. And so I asked around, and that's when I found out that you can actually upgrade. The ticketing is run through ShowClicks, and you just call ShowClicks directly, and they will upgrade you from whatever you bought before to VIP or whatever other upper tier ticket that you want.
I'm at the point where I have that upgrade number saved in my phone because every year, the moment tickets go on sale, I get the VIP Geekend. And then inevitably they will announce a guest that I want a guest-specific VIP for. So I call that upgrade number. Depending on the guest, I might need to wait on hold for a bit because everyone else is doing the same thing. But I will always upgrade to that guest because I know I'm going to get their stuff anyway. And it's a very easy process.
Nice.
So going back to, I suppose, just the way they do things, I found that their customer service in situ was very helpful. They have this entire, it's one of the halls that they basically repurposed specifically just for organizing the crowds and organizing people picking up tickets or buying tickets. I think it's called Hall E. It's basically, that's the area where everybody lines up in the morning. So people are not actually standing outside of the convention hall in order to go down to the vendor hall or in order to start lining up for the main stage. That's the only area you can actually access main stage from. And that's the area where you also have the entire, or at least majority of sort of like the information services, the guest services. I had a couple of questions and you just stop by and the staff is, super friendly, answered all my questions, very helpful. And then after that, basically people just spread out throughout the entire building, which again is huge. There was a lot of walking involved. I checked my iPhone, the step tracker. I was actually doing 15,000 steps on average per day. Ooh. So it was. You
got to get those Fitbit steps.
Yeah.
Comfy shoes, like convention tip 101.
Definitely. So it was very, I have to say that's probably both positive and the negative, the negative, positive and the non-positive. On one hand, it's great that it's so nicely spread out. You're not crowded. You have the space. You don't feel, you can enjoy yourself. On the other hand, it is a lot of walking. I mean, from the point, especially considering that they have separate entrances for different tickets. And it just so happened that the VIP one was the furthest away from the hotel where my sister and I were staying. It was like basically walk almost all the way across, around the building, enter and walk through almost the entire building in order to get to the vendor hall. Yeah. But, it's just something to deal with, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Staying the locale is actually, I like that area. It's not very far from Union Station. So if you're arriving by train, perfect. Lots of hotels in the area. Not so many, like restaurants, I suppose, if you want to go out after the hours, but that's,
a little bit for those.
Yeah, but you can find it. I mean, if anybody wants to like grab an Uber or a taxi to like Chinatown, which is probably like a 5-minute drive, and that has a ton of restaurants, that's all doable. So all in all, it's like, it's again, it kind of feeds into this whole general vibe of being very relaxed. Is when you're in the center of the city and you have access to everything.
And even so, you have to walk a decent bit off site to get dinner and stuff, but the convention has a lot of on-site food options for during the convention day, which is rare, I would say. I mean, it was pricey because it's convention food, but it was kind of like a food truck type setup without the actual trucks.
Yeah, it's like they called it the food court, but it was that sort of thing with food trucks. Or if you were all the way across the the other side of this giant vendor area, they do have their own convention center, sort of like this hole in the wall, so you can buy not so much burgers, mostly hot dogs, which again is overpriced, but they tasted pretty good.
Like stadium type food.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Talking about the general vibe of the convention. Sorry. All right, 3, 2, 1. Speaking about the general vibe of the convention, the crowds themselves, this particular year, the convention was extremely Trek friendly, which partly is because of the guest list that we had. And speaking of the guest list, I did pull up, I still have the mobile app where I kind of set up all my interests and my own schedules. And incidentally, that's another thing. Kudos to the organizers. Not only their website is great, the mobile app is wonderful.
The map is
yeah,
the app is amazing.
That was, it's not so much crazy in terms of number of guests, but it was the quality. They had 5 TNG cast members. So Gates McFadden was there, Will Wheaton was there, Marina Sirtis was there, Jonathan Frakes, and Brent Spiner. And that alone is kind of like already attractive if you're a Trek fan. On top of that, they had a Princess Bride reunion. So Carrie Elwes was there, Chris Sarandon, and Wallace Shawn. The latter of the two, it's Chris Sarandon and Wallace Shawn, actually had guest spots on Star Trek. So there you go. You already have additional Star Trek. For me personally, Mary McDonnell was there. So I can't call myself a Battlestar Galactica fan. I'm aware of it because it's part of the science fiction genre. But I really like her from a whole lot of other things that she's done in her career. And I have to say that she's basically a national treasure. I got the autograph and I did her Q&A panel, which were just brilliant.
Yeah.
And then you look at it, you have some of the people who you will see at other conventions, like Lou Ferrigno. He's on Wizard World Circuit. I know I see his name a lot. They did have Michael Biehn. They had Phil Lamar. So a lot of the folks that you will meet at other Comic-Cons. But it was just a very nice...
John Barrowman.
Yes. Yeah, they had a very nice, well-rounded, sort of like a little bit for everyone.
Regardless. John Bernthal, like hunka hunka.
Yes.
I will, sorry. I have a crush, and Claire and I have an ongoing thing about him because he
was a sweetheart. He really was. I mean, it's one of those... they probably do this for everyone, but I walked up to his autograph table and it's "Hello there, sweetheart" in Southern drawl. And then 4 hours later, you go up for his photo op, and then "Good to see you again, darling."
That's very Carl Urban of him. I had the same.
That's what I said.
Yeah. I've had the same experiences.
But it's like their goal in life to make as many people swoon as possible.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of swooning, Jason Isaacs was there. So
he was also there.
Yeah, and that was my sister admitted, she's like, I'm crushing on him badly. I'm like, well, go do it, because we went to his Q&A panel, and I think she was deliberating and finally decided not to do a photo op. But I really think that she should have gone for it. So it's just I loved everything about this particular convention in that regard. It's like everything I would be possibly interested in a convention, I found it in AwesomeCon. So it's yet another convention to put on my little roster that I usually keep track of during the year.
I will say that Star Trek Las Vegas prepared me for a specific moment that happened at AwesomeCon to me this year. So another person who was there was Mike Coulter, who plays Luke Cage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as anyone who's gone to Star Trek Las Vegas knows, pretty much all the guests are staying in the Rio. So if you're staying in the Rio, there's a large chance you're going to find yourself in an elevator, a Star Trek actor that you know and love. And you have to find a way to remain calm. Don't freak out. Don't freak them out. Just let them go about their business. So that happened to me at AwesomeCon with Mike Coulter. Walked into the elevator, looked up, said, "Hello, how are you?" He responded back. And then I said nothing else. And then we got to the lobby. He walked off, probably going out to get drinks with somebody. And then I had my freak out. Oh my God, I was in an elevator with Mike Coulter. So thank you, Star Trek. Thank you, Star Trek Las Vegas, for preparing me for that moment.
It's always weird. Like, I I don't know. Now I'm at the point where I just don't know what to do. And I really, like, I don't want to impose stuff. And then I'm like, dang it, I could have got a selfie. And it's like, a lot of times I feel like they're very open to like a random selfie. But yeah, I'm just like, I don't know.
But you know what?
If I'm out like and about and that happens, then I'm more comfortable asking for a selfie or something like that. But the elevator situation in particular is a special situation because in closed spaces, you don't want them to feel trapped because they literally cannot escape you.
Yep.
If they don't want to engage in this conversation. So I never want anyone to feel trapped like that, and I'm very cognizant of that.
But something. But you're absolutely right as far as like Vegas preparing us, because let's face it. I mean, there aren't that many conventions that actually have that sort of. Well, overkill, I suppose, is the wrong word, but in that regard, I mean, the number of guests and the fact that everybody's sort of like inside that little atmosphere of the hotel.
It's an intimacy.
Yeah,
I was intimacy.
Yeah, I went to Destination last year, and this whole thing, majority of the guests were staying in Hilton Metropole, which basically is the equivalent of Rio. That was sort of like the, in quotation marks, the convention hotel. The closest one to the convention center, and again, everybody was staying there. So I ran into keep thinking. I mean, you stand in the at the bar, sort of like they have the lobby area, and that's what happens. You basically there's Jason Isaacs, there's the Wilson Cruz. They just keep passing by. They're meeting their own friends, and in the elevator, I actually was in the elevator with both Marina Sirtis and Kate Mulgrew at some point, because people just going about their business, and I'm like, you know what? I was kind of like, I'm impressed that I was so cool about this, because we just stood there in the elevator and chatted, and that was it. Practice. It's practice.
It is practice.
People attend conventions. The power of conventions.
Yeah, I think that despite the fact that I have selfies that I wish I had gotten, at the same time, like, you don't always have to have a picture to have a memory. And I appreciate what you said, Sarah, about like respecting space in elevators and whatnot, because that is true. Like, they don't really have, like, sure, they can say no, but then they're like, oh, well, that fan's gonna be a jerk, or who knows.
It's a situation that's just not appropriate for that type of interaction between a fan and a guest.
The last thing I want to do is make them feel uncomfortable at a convention, because not only does it ruin that moment, but if you don't want to spoil their experience as a whole, because then you ruin it for any guests they might meet later, or maybe they won't come back to that convention at all.
Yep.
That might seem like a gross overreaction, but
it's not. I've seen that with
possible. Yeah.
And I've seen that directly with some people, not specifically Star Trek celebrities, but like other people who have gone to conventions who may be a vendor or a secondary guest or something, where they've had a bad experience or multiple bad experiences and are just like, yeah, this is not for me, and don't return. So it's hard. I understand being starstruck, and I encourage, like, when you're in a not chaotic, not a trapped space type of thing, like if somebody looks like they're open to being engaged, and even that is hard to gauge. I don't discourage interacting with the celebrity guests, but at the same time, there's a time and a place and a way, and it's hard for everyone to understand when that is, I think.
Yeah.
But
it's kind of like with the handshake conundrum.
Yeah.
When I go up for autographs, I never like to initiate handshakes, because if they don't like handshakes, then I'm awkwardly leaving my hand out there or forcing them into contact that they don't want. But if they can initiate the handshake, all right, great.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes it's even better to ask, especially if there's a staff member present. Like, for instance, they were very. Did you do a photo op with Will Wheaton by any chance?
Not at this convention.
Because they were actually, it was very, very polite, very respectful. They said, please respect his personal space, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who, it's very rare that he makes appearances on the East Coast. And there probably were fans who would have been
awesome con, but
they probably would have been completely thrilled to shake his hand and grab him and maybe let's do, high five, or let's hug, or, the people just go crazy when photo ops and you finally present it with, your idol. But no, it was very, like I said, very, very polite. Please, Just respect. It all comes down to respect.
Yeah. Speaking of respect, and then also how the staff handles that, last year one of the guests was John Boyega, and that was a huge deal for the convention. But there's always, I mean, no matter where you go, there's going to be people who are the worst. And he actually received a death threat that weekend.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God.
Because people are the worst. And the convention took it extremely seriously. They kind of separated his autograph area. They had metal detectors even. They had a police officer standing at his table. John was amazing with it. The convention did their best to make sure it was still a completely welcoming but safe environment for him. Everyone just all around handled it incredibly well. And it was still a great experience both for John and for all the fans. But it's a shame that there's always somebody who has to go and ruin things for everyone. And
yeah.
Well, and that really speaks of John Boyega too, because imagine going to this and being made aware of that.
Definitely.
And knowing that you need, even with those precautions, like you're still sitting in a space where something like that could happen. Like anyone could just turn around and say, no, absolutely not. I'm not comfortable with this. And for him to stay and do that is just, people. I mean, I don't think anyone listening to this podcast is one of those people, but I think that we're just becoming so much more aware of that threat that's out there
happening. Right. That, there's so much effort, trying to make this type of events and spaces safe. And for the most part, this pop culture conventions are probably the most accepting events of this type out there that we have. And then stuff like that happens. I mean, look, I think they changed the name, but what used to be the Phoenix Comic Con, this whole thing with
the weapon,
getting it with a gun, it just. Yeah.
I will give the convention credit on that because their bag check is interesting in the morning.
Yes. That's a correct way of putting it. That was a bit surprising.
Because there's some conventions that go to the extreme of everyone with a bag that fits something more than your hand. They're going to have you take it out, open it, and they're going to search it. And with large conventions, that can form extremely long lines.
Yeah.
The way AwesomeCon tends to handle it, or has handled it in recent years, is they have metal detectors, and if your bag sets off the metal detector, then they will pull you aside and search your bag. In some cases, the metal detectors weren't like the big gateway ones; they were just the kind of pole stand ones. So they weren't.
At first, I didn't even notice one.
Exactly. So a lot of people were like, they didn't check my bag.
Yeah, I'm sorry. The VIP entrance is very, I don't know, maybe because people are arriving at different times or something. But every time we would walk in, it's like there's no line. We're literally just going through. And the first day, Friday, I didn't even notice it. It's just kind of like it's there. And I saw the people with the tables kind of waiting. I expected that I would be called up there. No, I just passed by because nothing happened. There was a rule where they if you have a smartphone with you, please hold it in your right hand so we can see it. I don't know what's up with that. But
the right hand thing was odd. I didn't question it, but I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, then at some point I think I was like, well, maybe perhaps they're doing this to entertain themselves because I didn't hear any kind of alarms going off or anything. But there was probably about 5 of us entering at the same time, and my sister and I and 2 other people passed by, but one person got called to the table where you actually open your bags and everything. And I didn't hear again, no alarm bells or anything. So maybe they just randomly okay, out of 5 people we gotta pull somebody.
So they never made any sounds. I didn't notice this until Sunday, honestly. But the metal detector would be green if you were good to go, and it would turn red if it said anything, but there was no auditory indicator of that, so that's why it wasn't necessarily obvious ding, you're clear to go, or step to the side.
How tricky. And I was like, I was like, oh, that's interesting. Maybe they just do them sort of a random, every 20th person or something.
But because of that, there was no line ever.
Yeah. So that's that was fun. So if again going back to the fact that the website is very well put together, if you go in the drop-down menu. They actually have an entire section with all the policies. So their security policy actually describes that, bags might be searched and there might be uniformed police and police dogs at the entrances, sort of like everything like, that you possibly can see at the convention. Same goes for the anti-harassment and the cosplay and the costume policy and the weapons and how people are expected to behave during panels and the photo ops. So everything is very, a nice menu. We can basically look it up if, like we do, like when we compare it, basically conventions to each other. Very well done.
So was there a lot of cosplay at this convention?
It's a pretty heavy cosplay convention, but I would say there's an equal number of people who are just there to enjoy themselves. 50-50 maybe.
And there was plenty of track. I was actually very happy to see that. Some of the mostly costumes. I didn't see any kind of like those special, something unusual. So for the most part, it was just this, your usual Starfleet uniform.
I will say for general conventions, that's typically what I tend to see. Whereas at Star Trek conventions, you can do those little niche cosplays because people already know it's Star Trek related. Now they get to go the extra step of like, well, what's that extra cosplay? Because I do bar fight Jamie a lot. Or Jamie Kirk at Star Trek Las Vegas, but at a general convention, I'm just a girl with a bloody nose and a leather jacket, but nobody else is going to know that's a Star Trek reference.
Yeah, my favorite one is the Kirk having the allergic reaction from 2009. That's I think that's the stellar. But again, people would have to know what exactly this.
See, that one does have the subtle Starfleet Delta on the shirt, but it would definitely take people a lot longer than it took them at a Trek convention to get that reference. That was one of my favorite cosplays I've ever done, but never again. My hands were the worst.
All right. Sorry, a bit of a pause. So
we've jumped around. We did cosplay, we did tickets, the autographs, photo ops we sort of talked about, but
speaking something to mention about the crowds, this particular convention. Yes, for me, guest list, that was A+. That's wonderful. One of the reasons I went. But the second, equally as important reason was there were actually a lot of people that I know from other conventions that were going. And we got to hang out and we got to go to the same conventions together and we stood in lines for the photo ops and autographs together. And there were a lot of folks from STLV. Some of the people were even hosting their own panels, like Imhoff and Suki's and Weather, and they were all there with and we'll talk about panels probably in a bit. But it was just great to see, fellow friends at this point, because we've all known each other both online and actually in person for years.
Yeah, I went to the convention. I went to AwesomeCon with a coworker of mine, and I ran into you guys for the first time on Friday, and I ran into several other specifically Star Trek Las Vegas friends. And she's like, "How do you know? You know everyone." I was like, "Yeah, once you start going to a couple of conventions, it becomes kind of the same group of people, and then your friendship groups spiderweb out from that. Everyone introduces you to a new person, and then they introduce you to another person, and that group just keeps getting bigger." And it's like, yeah, I do know everyone now.
Sometimes it's funny because you actually become friends with someone, and then you meet at a third event, and they're like, "Oh my God, how do you know each other?" Because it's like, well, I've been friends with the person A and the person B. Meanwhile, A and B apparently went to college together. So it's that sort of thing. But so all of a sudden, the world becomes so much closer and smaller, which is wonderful.
My favorite thing is like watching on social media how many of my friends were there. I'm being like, hey, you and you need to go meet each other. And man, I hope that you and you get together. And then, oh yes, these people did get together. And I don't know, it's silly, but like I'm envious because I wish I was there. But I also just get really excited and happy, like seeing my friends that are there and them getting to meet and interact.
But it's silly fun. And I actually didn't, I expected that I will run into everyone that I knew was going, because we sort of like ahead of time, there were discussions, it was like raise hands if you're going, and people just comment on each other's posts on Facebook saying, I'll see you there, and are you doing this photo op, etc. And then yet there's still people that I know that they were there. Because they're either local or, so it's easy. They just go basically every year. And like, yeah, we'll meet you there. I literally, Alex Perry. Mm-hmm. I think I saw his back in the photo up line once. run into each other. Uh, and Oren Bell. I think I may be mispronouncing her last name, actually. She is the STLV vet as well. We make sure to say hello to each other every year in Vegas. She's actually local. I think she lives in Washington. And my sister and I just posted like a funny picture. Funny picture because my sister took it that it wasn't. It was just a weird picture, bottom line. Anyway, and I just posted it on Facebook. And she's like, both of you are there? How is it that I missed you? And we just never managed to run into each other.
Yeah, it's one of those hit or miss things. I don't usually make plans ahead of time to meet up with people because I assume I will run into them at some point, and then when you run into them, you make dinner plans or what have you. But when you have groups like this, especially Star Trek friends that are going to a general convention, you kind of assume that you will gravitate towards Star Trek panels, guests anyway, and your paths will eventually cross no matter what you do.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, sometimes the paths just never meet.
Well, and some people are there for a day. Not everyone's there for all 3 days, or someone's there at a specific time or whatever.
Yeah,
true.
We did manage to get a very nice group though together, especially on both. I think Friday night we went out to an Irish pub, and I don't know. We all went, right? Did you go with us? Because
I went Friday night, yeah.
Friday night, yeah, and that was nice. I mean, there was about I think 15 people in the crowd, something like that.
There's a lot of us.
2 tables in the pub and sat down, and it was just great to chat and just generally have fun.
Especially when you get to sit down in those types of settings, you already know you have something in common. For all of us, it just happened to be we all love Star Trek, but even just being at a Comic-Con type convention, you already have something in common, so you're already making that connection, even though I don't think I had actually met maybe 4 or 5 of the people at that dinner, but I happened to be sitting at that end of the table, and we talked the entire time because you've already established that connection. You just have to build off of it. And that's one of my favorite parts about conventions is even if I go somewhere not knowing anybody, I'm still going to make at least one new friend.
Yep.
Each time I go.
Yep.
Speaking of panels and programming, that's another thing that's definitely worth mentioning because, again, it's sort of like it parallels to the way the vendor hall was set up. You know, they had just your general pop culture coverage. You had the makers, you had the artist alley, you had the science area, which they actually had the term for it. They called it the Future Con. But that was a very impressive. I mean, I have like the exhibitor list through the mobile app, and the National Science Foundation had a booth. National Geographic, obviously Smithsonian, that's kind of a given. I mean, specifically the National Air and Space Museum. CIA had their own booth. It was more like tech technology
because they always have the coolest free stuff.
Yeah. American Association for Advancement of Science, NASA Aeronautics, that sort of thing. And it's all very hands-on. I mean, you can stop by and they have these posters and prints and pens, and there are actual scientists basically handling these booths. You can stop by and ask questions. There was a gentleman standing with actual globes of Moon and Venus. And you can go up and he's like, let's talk about it. You know, do you want to know about Mars? You know, it's everything.
NASA had an awesome VR section that you could take a virtual tour of. They had satellites and you could step outside. I say outside loosely, but the starry beyond was all around you, and you could step off a ledge to be floating in space. And you were really scared. I'm like,
did you try
something there? But like.
Sarah, did you try it?
Not this year, but I did it last year. And I remember having that moment of like, I know there's a floor where I'm about to step, but there is nothing there that I can see.
I'm always very weary when I have to put on something because I'm always wearing my glasses. My sister, who basically is the same way, well, Olga decided, she's like, oh, I'm going to do this. And she put something in her neck. So very careful when you have that sort of VR experience. Because literally, she said, and I just whipped my neck and I felt something go. But the experience was amazing. I mean, it's incredible that they have something like this at the convention at the end of the day.
And they even have, so they have that section of the exhibit hall or the vendor's room, but then they also have industry people, scientists run panels as well.
Yes.
One of the panels I went to was a collaboration with Lockheed Martin, and it was a Captain Marvel themed panel talking about the actual science of the movie, having a female aviator be represented on screen, a female superhero. But they always try and find ways to marry the fiction that we're there for with, well, here's the real science too. You can do this too. Yeah. And it was really nice to see, especially young girls in the audience who can see that for themselves.
And that's exactly what I was saying. They have that parallel between what's presented and when you actually have in the panels. They had the NASA administrator was actually there. He was part of several science panels. Dr. Erin McDonald, who's coming to the and she just, I love when she's hosting the panels, even if they're not necessarily science related. She hosted several panels. Like, for instance, there was the Women of Science Fiction they had on Friday, which was a brilliant panel.
Love that panel.
Yeah, it's great. They had Mary McDonnell, Gates McFadden, and Danielle Pennebaker. And it was great. I mean, you have this marriage between, science, actual science, and the science the way it is in science fiction. Great stuff. So that was certainly one of those things. I did mention the Pride Alley. Same thing. They had both presence in the vendor room, like the several aisles. So it's the queer creators and fans together. And they had specifically panels in the schedule that were part of that sort of like the schedule, the programming that was mirroring that. Just looking at the panel, they had several panels on diversity in general. Some of the stuff was specifically about like the gender, for instance, in sci-fi. The one that I went to was Resistance, Feminism, and Fandom. That was a great panel, actually.
Really
Sarah, you were there as well.
Yep.
Yeah. The special guest was Marina, so that made it even extra fun.
Of course.
But great discussions all across the board. It was truly enjoyable.
I love going to panels like that because as a cis white woman, I am not exposed to a lot of those facets of fandom, and I want to be, because the only way you understand is to be taught and immersed in it. And then we went to a panel on Saturday, Warp Speed ahead of Star Trek Discovery. And so I'm a bisexual woman, and I remember one of the panelists made a really good point that I hadn't even considered, but because I am not surrounded in those spaces often enough, you don't get that volley in your brain to come up with new ideas. And to have panels and just programming in general dedicated to those spaces that you don't typically get to be a part of in quote unquote regular life outside of the convention scene, it's really uplifting to be a part of that.
Yeah, I think it's also important to have multiple panels on those subjects. And I know that I think Sue and Amy were on several of these, but even outside of that, just to have different people and different perspectives, because having just, one person or two people there to represent, like, say, the queer community, for example, we're not homogenous. So like it often gets assumed that like one person or these two people are speaking for an entire community, whereas that's just not the reality. And it's not something that I see in some conventions, and something that I do try to push for in the conventions that I attend, is to at least have varied perspectives or multiple panels on similar subjects, so that you get a broader variety of guests and insight there. But that's really, I think a lot of times in a lot of places we're just not surrounded, especially in the queer community. Like, I think a lot of the fear and hatred towards our trans friends is that people don't have trans friends. And so because of they're not exposed to anyone to realize that, hey, they're people too, like they're just like us. And so getting to have those conversations and exposure to different ideas is super valuable. So I really appreciate that you made that point, Sarah.
Yeah, it's just nice, especially where I grew up. I grew up in Cape Cod, which Massachusetts as a whole is a fairly progressive state, but Cape Cod is like I'm trying to put this in a non-disparaging way. just a lot of old white people, I guess, very conservative, and there's hardly any diversity at all. Like the not so great joke, but the joke that went around in our high school is that the most diverse that we have is we have an Italian student, like their last name's Italian. Like that's great, but I wasn't exposed to other schools of thought. I mean, thankfully the internet exists, which how often do we say that? But so I forced myself to be immersed in other diverse thoughts and cultures and people. And so when I went to college, I wasn't completely caught off guard, but I know a lot of my classmates were, because we grew up in such a sheltered life. You don't even know other.
No, I'm from a small town in Kentucky. And that town, I didn't realize it as a child, but it was not intentionally segregated, but it was absolutely segregated. And I had maybe, I don't know, there was one black student in our school. And my family in Kentucky, while some of them are very open and progressive and accepting, others are not. And so like, I'm grateful I got moved to South Florida, as traumatic as that was. I got taken to the melting pot and exposed to many different cultures and kinds of people. And I'm so, so grateful for that. Marina, did you want to?
I was about to say that I'm incredibly grateful that I live next to a city like New York, and that I work in New York, so I'm there basically every day. Sometimes you walk down the street. I mean, obviously, things are different depending where you are and which part of the city. But overall, New York as is, that is the melting pot. You go through the streets and, it's every color, every shape you can possibly imagine. And it's delightful. And sometimes I'm like, well, not everybody has that experience. And that's why people are the way they are. You like Sarah was saying, you're not exposed to this sort of thing. A lot of people just don't understand that it's, we're all the same at the end of the day.
Yeah. There's a lot of, so there's ignorance, and not in a bad, like, not that you're so ignorant, but just you're not
ignorance. That's the problem.
You haven't learned yet.
Yeah. You haven't been exposed. And so that's why, it's really great to see more conventions with more diverse paneling, and multiple voices. It's tremendous.
And truly, it's celebrated by the convention too, which is nice.
Yeah.
I was about to say that it's great to see that they put so much thought into it, because literally there was everything, not only like pop culture when we're talking about different genres, but it was everything in terms of diversity and anything you can think of. I mean, I kind of enjoyed when you walk into one of the escalators, takes you down closer to the area that they designated that Awesome Con Junior for the kids. And first I was like, well, what is going on? Because there's plush toys and there's the area for coloring, and there's like they put up sort of like a panel wall made out of like whiteboard stuff where you can actually draw on it. And then I looked at at the map in the app, and I'm like, oh, that's what it is. It's specifically, you come with the little kids, perfect, they have something to do. And there's even a little bit of in the schedule specifically for the kids, like little martial arts performances and artists doing presentations, the DreamWorks screening, that sort of thing. So it's tremendous that so much thought was put in for literally like every possible age, gender group that you can think of that can possibly and
speaking of that, like how much they cater to everyone that they know is going, AwesomeCon is one of the most accessible conventions that I've been to. They really make a point, every single panel, not just the main stage ones, but every panel that has a celebrity guest, and any other panel that requests it has an ASL interpreter. They have seating available for anyone who, specifically for the ASL interpreter, if you need it, you can sit right in that section. If you have an accessibility issue as far as you can't stand for long periods of time, you can get a wristband that will get you to the front of photo op lines and autograph lines, so you're not standing for long periods of time. They have chairs in the photo op area set aside for those people that need to sit, and it's never an inconvenience for the convention. It's always just part of what they have there for everyone, and I really love that.
In the rooms, both in just regular smaller ones where they would have sort of like average size panels, and in the main stage, they have chairs with those. It's like they marked it in like sort of like some sort of like a red I don't know, is it a piece of paper, piece of plastic, whatever it is, but basically they
some
would
sort of
chairs.
elastic fabric.
Yeah, it's specifically designated for people, perhaps you're on crutches, or if you're in the wheelchair, you actually have a space where you can either, move yourself over to that, or they can take that chair out and you can, basically use your wheelchair to maneuver. And those, it's kind of funny because nobody actually stands there and says, okay, do not sit in those seats. It's almost like people kind of like they're seeing that nobody's touching those chairs until the panel kind of gets going, and then, well, obviously everybody who wanted to be at the panel is already here, and only then, if people want to kind of move up and take them up, to take those chairs, then that's what happens. But otherwise, it's like it's specifically there, and it's like Sarah said, it's all very nice and polite.
That's great. As someone who would take advantage of those spaces, it's really important, and it's again something that gets missed by a lot of conventions. Accessibility is a huge issue, and so I'm glad to hear that.
There was actually a lot of stuff that I didn't get to see, just purely because it was relaxed, but it was very busy between the photo ops and the autographs and those panels, which I think I did about maybe 5 or 6 different panels throughout the convention. I know it kind of sounds silly for those people who have only been to STLV because you do manage to do more programming.
But all the programming's in one hallway.
Exactly. Here you have to kind of run back and forth, up and down. So there's only that much that you can do. But there was, I know that they had costume contests. That's sort of a given at most conventions these days.
Yes.
I know that quite a few people participated just based on what was posted in online, mostly on Facebook and Instagram. But I didn't go to that one, and I didn't go to the after party, which is they actually have an official after party on Saturday. Did you get to do any of the extras well, they're not extras, but any of these other things beyond the programming that the convention offered?
So I wasn't able to go to the costume contest this year, but I have gone in the past. It's fairly impressive. The people that they have for it either both apply ahead of time, I think, or you can also do a walk-in, and they'll have people kind of hallway judging you, not in the actual hallway, but they have people set aside for that. And the work that people put into these costumes is incredible. They usually try and go into some of that on stage, so the audience knows just how much work has been put into this outfit. Because I feel like some costume contests do the runway walk across stage, and then everyone sees it, and then they walk away. But these people are creating incredible cosplays, and they deserve to have people hear just how much work that they put into it.
That's kind of like Vegas. I mean, I enjoy that part where either Terry Farrell or, well, Michael Westmore, that's the best part when he's part of the judging panel, when they actually have the conversation on the stage as far as, how did you put this material together? That's always fun.
Yeah. And then as for the after party, they've been doing that every year that I've been attending. I haven't attended this one specifically because I usually do one of those like, well, I'll see the night of if I'm feeling it, but then it always sells out because it's so popular. So maybe one year I'll be a bit more proactive about it. But it's a pretty cheap ticket. I think it's only $20 early bird and then $25 at the door. And everyone that I've talked to that has gone to it has had a great time. It's really well organized. It's not too claustrophobic, but it's still a good club party scene for the people who like that. Some people go in cosplay. Some people just go. As far as I know, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah,
I'll go.
Yeah, I have to admit the only reason I decided to skip that is, well, first of all, my sister and I attended together, so it was part of like, well, this is besides having fun and meeting the favorites and new guests, it's also our time together. So we just decided, Saturday night we're gonna go out together, and we're probably gonna crash because Saturday, as usual, was a very long and very busy and very tiring but fun day.
Oh yeah, it gets exhausting, and then I guess the only solution they could have to that is have the after party on a Friday, but then everyone's going to be exhausted for the exhausting day of Saturday. So there's no great time for it, but people still have a lot of fun.
For the young people, y'all. It's for the 22-year-olds that can handle this, not the...
I'm still young. I'm not near 30 at all.
Oh, no. Well, You're officially old. Sorry.
26, I could still round down to 25 and say mid, but I'm at 27 now, and I feel like I'm really, I can't avoid nearing 30 much longer. Like, I'm still trying to round it down to 25, but that's not how rounding works.
Yeah, I'm getting close to 40, and according to my mother, she'd never mentioned that in her presence. So, the conventions still get me really, really excited, so I tend not to think about that part of thing.
Yeah.
Conventions just give, I'm very much an introvert, but being at conventions just gives me energy.
Yeah,
which is
me
the
too.
complete opposite of usual crowd interactions.
But then it drains me. Like by the end of the convention, then I'm like, I don't need to be around people for a month. Like I'm good.
Absolutely.
I can't remember. It might have been like Michael Wen or someone had said that at the convention it's like they're turned up to level 10.
Yeah.
And I think that is just the excitement. Because like, at home, I like to go to bed by 10. At a convention, I'm up until God knows when, and I don't know how I do it, aside from just the excitement and adrenaline and admittedly alcohol. Sorry. I don't really drink it much at home either. So it's just like all those things together. And you don't want it to be over. It's like each night is like, oh no, it's a day less with everyone.
And the post-con depression is real. It's one of those. I was lucky this year that I went with a coworker, so I saw her on Monday and I saw her the rest of the week, and you kind of have that. You can still kind of talk about it, like reliving the good old days, even though it was just that weekend.
Yeah.
But, it's one of the few weekends where, I'm the type of person who, with fandom stuff, I need to talk about things, like if there's a season finale that came up, and there's only so much I can talk about in a group text. There's something to be said about geeking out with somebody in person, and conventions just give you that opportunity, and you have to talk.
Yep.
It's the perfect outlet. So overall, let's see, what else did we not manage to cover as far as what was happening at the Awesome Con? I think we covered pretty much everything you can think of. This was an excellent convention, all in all. So I guess the question is like, what's the highlight? Did you have something that was like, okay, this really made the convention for me?
For me, the guests that they get every year are so varied, and they're grand guests, right? They always get some from major franchises, and even the smaller franchises, and being able to meet those people and giving people the opportunity to actually speak with those guests at their tables. There's conventions, Star Trek Las Vegas, where some guests, you kind of have that thank you next, you get your autograph, and then you're shuffled along, not to the fault of the guest, just to the circumstances that they're put in. But I always feel like at this convention, I get the chance to say as much as I want to them. They let people stand in line if they're not buying an autograph, they just want to say hi to their favorite actor. And I really like that, because not a lot of conventions let you do that, because you're taking up a spot from somebody. But I hate the idea of, nothing against people do this, some people like to, but I hate buying autographs online, because for me, when I buy an autograph, I'm paying for the experience to meet that person, and hopefully have a decent interaction with them. And this is one of those conventions where I'm almost always guaranteed to have that worthwhile connection.
I noticed something. The fact that they had that much actual physical space was very much a factor, because a lot of times you get the same setup. What's comparable in size convention that I've been to? Probably Montreal Comic Con. It's a little bit less people, but it's the same idea, about the same number of people in the guest list. It felt like everybody was rushed because there wasn't much room. So you get these lines and you got to get people moving. Otherwise, you're going to have a real problem with overcrowding on your hands. In this case, that wasn't there. There was actually all these booths that would just line up in this one giant row. And people just, they just kind of circulated. And you could come up, and if there was nobody there, great. Go up and, you entertain the guest, basically, via chatting. Yeah.
Especially when the guest has room to move around too, because a lot of them will do that, like bounce out in front of the table and do selfies with you. And if anyone got an autograph and or selfie with Doug Jones last year, he was one of those people that definitely made use of that. Like, he had space to move around, and he moved around, and he interacted with you and engaged with you, and it really shows. And sometimes just having that setting is a part of that.
I saw him at STLV. It was the very last day, and I caught him with very little line, and he spent maybe like 5 minutes doing different poses. And asking me questions, and that type of experience is just so amazing compared to standing in a line, being told not to touch or talk to William Shatner. Sorry. Not sorry, actually. And, smile for your photo and move on. And I get when people have long lines and there's lots of people, and I also get not wanting to be touched. I think that not being spoken to is a little bit much.
Yeah.
That shows really no respect or recognition for the people paying to take their photo with you. So that's just not great. But
definitely agree.
People like Doug really bring it home, and I think I paid like $20 for some selfies, and that was a better experience for me than like some of my actual photo ops. So yes, we love Doug Jones. Yay.
Yeah.
Definitely a highlight last year.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure will be this year once they get their filming schedule ironed out.
I did the photo op with him in Vegas last year, and then Destination came several months later, and I did the photo op again because I just couldn't not see him again.
How can you not? It's when someone, like, especially when it's something like selfies at a table and it's super inexpensive. Like, again,
and it's always a new and different experience. Like, you're not just getting the same thing.
Yeah, and they may remember you, they may not. But you still, if you're there for that, just to have that fun moment with somebody,
it's everything.
then, like, and it doesn't really matter if they remember you or not. Like, they see a lot of people, so
and they know you in that moment.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, as far as my experience is concerned, again, this was the first time attending, so the guest list, perfect. My mind blown when I actually got to meet Mary McDonald, because she was just brilliant in pretty much every respect. And it was like I did the photo op the day before her birthday, so it was like, oh, that's kind of great. I can actually happy birthday, and she was just so. She was lovely and super, super friendly with the friends, and it was just an amazing experience. And then again, the fact that we all got to hang out, and it was just so great to see everybody, even though majority of these people, like, I'm going to be seeing you in Vegas in a couple of months, but it's different. Now it's different. We all get to do something else outside of Vegas. Now we step out of that atmosphere for a little bit and do other things together. Any last minute thoughts?
Not that I can think of.
Yeah, we pretty much covered everything. So.
I would say it sounds like both of you would attend again.
Yes, much so.
It's something
tickets
like
go on sale in the fall of this year.
Nice. I hope I think right now the one convention I will be going to at some point, I don't know when, is Dragon Con.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I've wanted to do it, but it's so close to STLV that I can't really afford to do both so close together. However, there's actually a longsword fencing competition thing at Dragon Con, and since I am a longsword fencer now, which, sorry, like, if you know me on our network, you hear that in like every podcast I do. Swords are awesome. But like, my partner wants to go, and apparently he has friends in Atlanta that we can stay with and all this. So I'm like, it's actually accessible for me now.
It all comes together.
Yeah, but I think aside from that, like, Awesome Con is one that just sounds really great, especially again with that programming. Just listening to that's something that is a highlight, because honestly, I don't really go to conventions for the guests anymore. Like, it would be great. Like, Mary McDonald's amazing. She has a great podcast, Lady Band podcast. Everyone should check out. And she's someone I would love to meet. But overall, it's like, if it's Star Trek people, I usually see them at STLV, except for Will Wheaton. And outside of that, like, I don't know. I get that weird, like shyness stuff, I guess. I don't know, but
it's funny how things has progressed. Like when I just started doing conventions, it was exclusively track. Like I didn't actually venture out to do anything. And I think it started when who was at, I think it was New York Comic Con, Sigourney Weaver. That's it. I did, and I was like, I want the photo op because that's, come on, aliens, the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I went, and of course, New York Comic Con kind of blew my mind because it was like, that was 2000.
That's a transition from Star Trek Las Vegas.
Oh yeah, very much. I mean, it kind of like it was a learning curve, but I think it's kind of great that it was sort of like I went first Comic Con and it was New York Comic Con, boom. So things sort of like after that, it was like, yeah, already I experienced it on a much larger scale, so scaling it down is okay. Plus, being in New York, I'm okay with crowds. I did that.
Yeah.
Never really bothered me. So after that, it kind of like, well, who else is out there? I mean, it doesn't have to be track. I really enjoyed, before I came to the United States, movies that United States produced, Hollywood movies from the 80s and 90s. I know all these people just through those movies. Mm-hmm. And it became kind of like, well, who's interesting out there that I can actually now meet in person and, shake hands and do the photo op and everything. So that kind of, it's still a factor. Sometimes I look at the convention like, well, who else is going to be there? And then now, of course, just purely through the fan experience, knowing the other fans that are going, friends that I'm with, that's also a factor.
Yeah, I asked that same question about who's going to be there, except it's about my friends. And honestly, like that would be the driving factor for me, is that if I go somewhere on my own, it helps to know that I would have friends there to help me, because I'm really just bad with directions and knowing where to be and where to go. And so knowing that I wouldn't be alone, it would be a highlight. And again, like I just love seeing your photos, Marina, with like all my friends, and the photos of like, oh, these wonderful women are in this photo, and other friends too. But it just makes me so happy. So yeah, okay, I'll be quiet.
I guess to kind of like the finishing note is that it is certainly a convention worth considering if people are looking to, new places, new events to attend. I will certainly going to be, it's now firmly in my roster. If something pops up and I see other people going, I might go again. Oh, I probably will go again, I think.
I'm going to go again.
Yeah. Next year is going to be a bit tricky because besides, obviously Vegas, I'm also doing the Star Trek cruise, so I have to be very careful what other things I'm considering because it's a bit of a overkill and my credit cards hate me at the moment because I'm in the process of actually paying for the cruise right now.
So envious. That's another bucket list thing.
Yeah, and next year is the 25th anniversary of Voyager on top of everything else. So
yep.
Oh, it's going to be a lot of fun. All right. So let's kind of finish up here. So Sarah, where can people find you online?
Most of my internet things I can be found at Sadieyuki, SADIEYUKI, or on Facebook and Twitter, I'm Sarah T107. So SARAHTEE107.
Right, great. Heather, where can people find you online?
I am on Twitter at LLAPosper, and I will take this moment just to remind everyone that the Tricorder Transmissions has a Patreon, so if you like what you heard tonight or you like our other shows and want to support us, you can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. We have varied tiers with lots of really great perks. One of those perks is an exclusive event at STLV, which again is coming up very soon. So we love adding people to our Tricorder Tribe family and appreciate everyone who becomes a patron. So our account is patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions if you'd like to support us there. And then the network is at Tricorder Show and the tricordertransmissions.com and all that good stuff. And Marina, what about you? Where can we find you?
You can find me on Facebook, my full name, or Twitter, Instagram at Dracorex, DRAKKOREX. You can find Shoreleaf, well, first of all, via our main page, www.thetricordertransmissions.com, or on Twitter at Shoreleaf. So thank you very much, ladies, for joining me for this wonderful discussion. Awesome times at AwesomeCon. And I hope our listeners enjoyed listening to us talking about this, and I hope they consider attending the convention in the future. So I guess that's it for me. Keep on tracking, everyone.